The format for this meeting is an interview with an alcoholic, the hot seat, inside the alcoholic studio. A speaker will be asked a series of questions that range from their personal story, the steps, relationship with God, and carrying the message. There are no right answers, just a fun and interesting way to share the speaker's personal insight. Our speaker for tonight is Tim. Timekeeper, please allow 90 seconds per question. The meeting may run slightly longer. Members, please feel free to leave if needed. Speaker, please say done when you have finished your answers, or please say pass on questions you would prefer to skip. Are you ready?
I am.
Let's begin. Tim, please generally describe, in your own words, our basic text, the book Alcoholics Anonymous.
Well, the basic text, Alcoholics Anonymous, for me is pretty much a guideline how I run my life now. I thought it was preposterous when I first got sober that I was going to be reading a book and learning how to live. I got sober when I was 57, and I thought I knew everything. And obviously I didn't. I had people telling me things that I knew were true, but I was not living that life. And people were pointing things out to me, and when I didn't agree with them, it came out in anger. And as I read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, things became very apparent of what I was doing wrong. Done.
Are you an alcoholic? And if so, what personally makes you an alcoholic?
I am an alcoholic, and personally, I have the inability to stop drinking once I start. The beauty of my sobriety is I've only had one. This is my only sobriety in life. I've tried to quit drinking before on my own power, and it never worked. I could not stop drinking no matter how hard I tried or what the reasons were. I always came up with an idea or a thought that drove me back to drink. My life was unmanageable, but it wasn't my fault. I blamed everyone. It couldn't have been my fault because I'm not a bad guy. But I know from my experience and with other alcoholics that I know if I drink that I will not be able to stop. Done.
What does the concept of anonymity mean to you?
Well, the concept of anonymity means to me that I will not talk about anybody else's name or share anybody else's name at a public level. My own feeling of anonymity is I feel like I can tell people that I'm an alcoholic that I think need help or maybe want questions. I might think they need help, but they don't. I can relate to them that I'm an alcoholic and I'm sober, and I can show you how I did it. So anonymity personally for me is different than it would be for me and your name.
Please give us a brief sketch of your drinking career up to the time you quit.
Brief is going to be difficult. I'll talk quickly. My parents were both alcoholics. My father killed himself when I was 15, alcoholically. He slit his wrist, but it was, not to go into detail, it was because he couldn't stop drinking. And I swore that I would never, ever drink. And I kept that promise until I was about 17 years old. And then I made it to where I would never drink beer because that was my parents' drink of choice. And of course, when I ended up an alcoholic and couldn't stop drinking, beer was my drink of choice. I did not like the way it tasted or smelled or anything else, even after I drank for 42 years or 40 years, whatever the numbers are. Again, I started drinking to fit in with the crowd. I didn't really... To begin with, I didn't feel like I needed to drink to change the way I thought. I just wanted to fit in with the crowd. I felt like I needed to do that to be a part of the group.
Alcoholism is described in the book as a fatal illness. What does that mean to you?
Personally, that means that if I drink, I'm going to die. Like I said earlier, this is my only sobriety, the first time I've gotten sober in my life. And I do believe if I drink again, I will die. I don't believe I'd be able to stop. It sounds a little egotistical almost, like I'm a bigger alcoholic than other people. But I just don't believe that I have another. I don't believe if there's a reason that I drink again, I do believe that I've chosen to die. So personally, I think for me to drink again is to die.
What are the conditions of your mind and body that accompany your alcoholism?
Could you read that again?
Absolutely. What are the conditions of your mind and body that accompany your alcoholism?
Well, my mind and body, my mind thinks about alcohol. I don't know, that's confusing to me. My mind and my body about alcohol. I'm an alcoholic, and I don't think there's anything I can do again. If I start drinking again, my mind is convinced that I can't stop. And my body, I would assume that my body would feel the same way. I would get the cravings again to drink that I got when I was trying to quit on my own, and physically I couldn't do it. And I mean, it's been 10 years, but I still can feel that my body, I had to have a drink. It's hard to put into words.
In your understanding, what is the role of a sponsor? Do you have a sponsor? And if so, how often are you in contact?
Well, I do have a sponsor, and I am in contact with my sponsor. It can be every day, or it can be I'm going to say 3 days. I rarely go 3 days without speaking to my sponsor. The role that I see a sponsor, my role as a sponsor is walking hand in hand with the sponsee. Over the time that I've been a sponsor, and that's been about 9 years, I have come to the conclusion that I cannot pull a sponsor along. I can't get behind them and push them along. I have to walk side by side with them and show them how the program works. If I push the program or anything else that has to do with life, basically, if I push it on somebody, I'm pushing them away. And I choose not to do that anymore. I've done it in the past. I did it early in my sponsor career, against my sponsor's wishes. He told me not to do things, and I got to where I wouldn't tell him I was doing it because I thought I was doing the right thing. And then when it came obvious that he was correct, and I would tell him I did it, and I don't do that anymore.
How have your sponsorship needs changed from early sobriety until now?
Early in my sponsorship, you mean me being a sponsor?
As a sponsee, how have your needs...
Oh, as a sponsor.
Yeah, how have your needs changed?
Well, I feel like I hate to use the word graduated because that means I'm done. I'm not done, but I got to a point with my sponsor that I'd gone through the steps, and when I call him or meet with him with questions, we don't go back to step one and go through what my issues are. Typically, it's going back to step 4 and seeing what my part of something was, and we can get on with it. Most of the time, it's something that I've done in the past, and he reminds me of that particular thing, and it then comes to light, oh yeah, I forgot. So, and the nice thing about having some sobriety time with my sponsor, I've had the same sponsor since the first time I've had a sponsor. Some days I'm the sponsor, some days he's the sponsor. It goes both ways, which is a very nice relationship to have.
Have you completed the 12 steps? And if so, what is your suggested time frame for completing the steps of AA?
I have completed the 12 steps. I don't know the number of times I've completed the 12 steps because when I take a sponsee through the steps, I'm going through the steps with them. The time frame for that is that's a difficult number or time to put down because every alcoholic that I've had an experience working with is different. Every single one. Some of them are on fire and want to go faster than they really should. And I try and slow them down because they're not quite getting the concept of some of the things they need to understand. And other ones, I need to I hate to use the word push because I don't like to push people, but I remind them that they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing in the time frame that they should be doing it. And sometimes that keeps them from calling me back, which I have no control over. And then when things aren't going their way, they'll call me up and say, gee, you were right. I should have been doing that. I see what I was doing wrong now. Let's get back in the program. So every sponsee is different.
In your own words, please describe steps 1, 2, and 3.
Well, step 1 for me is the only step I have to do 100%. I have admitted I'm powerless over alcohol, and my life was unmanageable. Believe it or not, I had completed step 1 before I even knew there was a step 1. I was powerless over alcohol, and I knew it, and I could tell anybody that, but I was a functioning alcoholic. That was my term I used. Step 2, when I came to believe there was a power greater than myself, I had some God shots, I call them, some spiritual experiences early in sobriety that just brought my conception of God, my God, into my life in a way that I couldn't deny. So my step 2 was pretty easy for me. Not everybody has that. And when I tell that story, sometimes it sounds a little egotistical, but I don't know any other way to tell it. And step 3, the same thing. I made a decision to turn my will and my life over the care of God as I understood God. Again, if I'm a true believer in God, it's difficult for me not to turn my will and my life over to God. You know, in some sponsees, I let them use their own conception of God. Again, if I push my God on somebody, I'm pushing them away. And if I do that, I'm not doing what I think I should be doing as a sponsor.
What does your unmanageability and self-will look like?
You don't want to see it. It can be really bad. I'm a typical egotistical alcoholic, which I don't want to say it's normal for every alcoholic, because when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't have an ego. I'll show you I don't have an ego. And my unmanageability was not my fault. I blamed everybody else. If you had my life, you'd drink too. I was a victim. And just any other reason I could use to where I could keep drinking and keep living the way I wanted to live. It was unmanageable, but it was the best I could do, so there you go.
What is your concept of a power greater than yourself, and how are you turning your will and life over to it?
Well, the neat thing about my God, again, I had some very spiritual experiences when I was new in recovery, and one of them I was in a rehab, and we were on blackout, and the only place you could go by yourself was to church, which is about a block away. And me and 3 of my buddies went down there for church one Sunday, and it was like the pastor was talking directly to us, and it was very eye-opening. And it happened 2 weeks in a row. I went back to the rehab I was in, and I asked my counselor if they were talking to the pastor and getting the programs in sync with each other, and he said, no, we don't do that. And it was, like I say, another example, another God shot that I had, that my will in my life and my conception of God was coming together, and it was out of my control. It was happening, and it was just an amazing experience for me.
Please briefly describe your experience with steps 4 and 5.
Well, step 4 and 5 for me, I did them rather quickly. I started step 4 the day I got out of rehab. So I was 10 days in detox, 30 days in rehab, and the day I got out, I met with my sponsor and started the 4th step. And also the 5th step, I didn't start writing anything down. I just basically told him my life story one afternoon in a car, crying my eyes out, telling him what a horrible life I had. And he got me to start writing the things down and doing, not exactly like the big book said, but it was the same concept as the big book. 3 columns, what was my part in it, and we got more detailed later about that. But that first day was pretty eye-opening for him.
What does the exact nature of our wrongs mean to you?
Well, the exact nature of my wrongs, could fill up a dump truck. What I like to do, especially with sponsees, is to put the wrongs down on the 4th step that are at the top of my list. Because if I put everything wrong down that I've done, I could never finish that. I like to put the fire out as quickly as I can for the things that are the most burning. And as those fires go out, then the little things that I was doing wrong are starting to be bigger. And I put those fires out, and then it gets to where pretty soon I'm not such a bad guy. I don't do things anywhere near like I used to. My life is manageable, and things start going very well for me.
Please briefly describe, in your own words, steps 6 and 7.
Well, I was ready for God to remove all the defects of character, and like most newcomers, I thought that was just going to be the way it worked. I asked God to remove them. I was ready in step 6, and then I prayed to God to remove them, and then I found out that's not the way it worked. I had to continue working the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and making those problems I had in life, the defects I had, become manageable. They still haven't all gone away, but when they're in my life, when they're happening, I know exactly that they're happening and what to do about it. Sometimes I just keep my mouth shut. Other times I keep running my mouth because it feels good to have some defects every once in a while. As long as I don't hurt too many people and I can make amends later, sometimes it's what I have to do, unfortunately.
What are some of your character defects, and are they being removed?
Well, one of my biggest character defects that I'm aware of is my ego, and my ego gets removed by my higher power, who I choose to call God, by a number of different ways, and it's out of my control. I can wow, that's I wish I had an example to give you right now. I don't. Ego's a big one for me. Judging people is huge, and I find when I judge people that before I know it, I'm judging them for doing the things that I've done all my life. It's like a flashlight or a spotlight on them, and once I get to know about it, or one of my sponsees or my sponsor says, gee, that's the way you acted too. Why are you mad at them for doing it? When it comes to light, then it's very eye-opening.
Please briefly describe steps 8 and 9.
Well, step 8 for me, my sponsor took my 4th step, and after I did a 5th step, he added some names and things to my 4th step, which I wasn't really ready for. And we went over those. Mine were all names. There was no institutions that I had to deal with. There were names of people. And step 9, I was ready to. I know I needed to get through the steps to save my life. And step 9 for me was very eye-opening, because when I started making the amends to these people, I went through the amend with my sponsor before I ever went to the person to do it. We went through a scenario. He went through some responses I was going to give. It was like writing a play and not exactly knowing what the other person's going to say, but pretty sure we did. So it was very eye-opening how that works.
Why is it important to straighten out our past?
Well, for me, my past, again, if you had my life, you'd drink too. And my past, especially the people I needed to make amends to, was heavy on my mind. I felt very guilty about some of the things I'd done. I wanted to clear that up. I could not see those people and talk to those people without feeling guilty about it. Some of the people I made amends to, I didn't even like. I didn't run around with them or like them. I had to hunt them down. But at the same time, I did not want to meet them somewhere face to face and have those amends or have the feeling that I had to make amends just pop right up. I wanted to take control of that, of course, being an egotistical alcoholic. I want to take control of my amends and do them properly to my standards, I guess, lack of an egotistical word.
When you were actively drinking, did you drink whiskey in your milk?
No. I stopped drinking milk. That's another long story, so I won't go into it. But I was never a hard drinker. When I first started drinking, it was the Boone's Farm and the Pagan Pink Ripple and the drinks of the 60s, the wines of the 60s. And then I started drinking beer, and I got to where I'd drink beer like it was water. And if I did drink whiskey occasionally, but when I did, I'd drink it like beer. And I black out, I'd pass out, so I didn't drink whiskey very often. So I was a beer drinker, light beer.
Please briefly describe your experience with steps 10 and 11.
Step 10 and 11 to me, and I tell my sponsees this, 10, 11, and 12 you can do from day one. I was taught to do the steps in order, and that's 1 through 9. Step 10 and 11, I can take personal inventory, and when I'm wrong, I can promptly admit it. If I button line somewhere accidentally, I can make amends right away and get to the end of the line or whatever it takes to make that right. The faster I make amends for the things I do, the better off I am. If I wait too long, then it basically goes to a 4th step. I have to do some paperwork. I have to see my part in it. I have to go do a 9th step to the person and make amends, which isn't good. Step 11, prayer and meditation I do every day, morning and evening every day, and all during the day when I need it. And again, with my ego, I'm usually praying for other people because they're not doing what I want them to do.
What does meditation mean to you, and how do you practice it?
The very bizarre thing about that, in the early 70s, I took a transcendental meditation class, and I became one of those folks, and I meditated twice a day for quite a long time, and it always put me to sleep. 20 minutes, I had to set an alarm clock, and it put me to sleep. So when I started meditating in AA, I try and, to me, prayer and meditation, when I'm praying, I'm asking or talking to God, and when I meditate, I'm listening. And when I listen, I fall asleep. So I have a bit of a time with that, especially at night when I'm doing my prayer and meditation, I'm fast asleep. So I have to basically do my nighttime prayer and meditation part that I do it, that most people do in bed. I do it the next morning when I wake up. So
To avoid the subtle foe that is alcohol, the book says we do not let up on our spiritual program of action. Please tell us what your spiritual program of action means to you.
well, I've talked to my sponsor about this because, again, it's an egotistical thing. And he told me anything you do for other people is not egotistical if it's true. I do a lot of things for people. And I was blessed with being able to retire 5 years ago. And even before I retired, I was working with other alcoholics and non-alcoholics, doing things to help them. I found when I'm helping someone else, I'm not thinking about what a horrible life I had. I don't have a horrible life now, but I've had a horrible life, in my opinion. And when I'm working with another alcoholic, I don't have to worry about that. I've sponsored, I don't know, my ego says, you should have written all these names down, or at least a number, because I want to tell everybody I've sponsored 300 guys. I don't know how many guys I sponsored, but it's been a lot. And not all of them have stayed sober, obviously. And I'm a firm believer when I'm helping somebody else, I'm not thinking about me.
Please briefly describe step 12.
Well, again, step 12 is having had my spiritual awakening, I can carry the message to other alcoholics, and I can do it in a number of ways. I used to take an AA meeting into the local juvenile hall. I went through that system when I was a juvenile, and I thought I would be able to go in there and tell them my story, bring people in to tell their story, and I found out at the time I was 60 at the time, that a 60-year-old man telling teenagers how to run their life wasn't working. Because I remembered when I was that age, old men telling me what to do wasn't happening. So now I go into juvenile hall with another hat on doing something else, but I'm able to show them a better way of living, and drugs and alcohol aren't part of it.
Can you share with us a spiritual experience you have had as the result of these steps?
Well, the spiritual experience, the very first one I had, and this isn't a result of the steps, but it's the one I had in detox, was I mentioned earlier my father committed suicide when I was 15, and I held that resentment for 42 years. He killed himself, and I was angry at him about it. When I was in detox, I discovered, I felt like I knew why he did it. He was a hopeless alcoholic. He could not get sober, and he thought he was doing us a favor by killing himself, and his insurance money would help us. That's the way I felt that he thought, because that's the way I felt when I was in detox. Very, very spiritual to me. All the resentments, all the anger that I had against my dad were gone in an instant. And I knew exactly the way he felt.
What is the message of AA, and why is it important to carry this message?
I believe the message of AA can go to anybody, whether they're alcoholic, drug addict, thieves, truly religious people. It's a way of life for me that I wish they teach it in school. I wish I was taught this way of life as a young man. Treating people the way I want to be treated, to be honest and open and do the right thing, and you make a mistake, you admit it. Life run by the principles of AA to me is, without a doubt, a great life. I can't imagine not living my life this way.
What are some of the principles you are practicing in your affairs today?
Well, the principles for me, the honesty and the trustworthy, the integrity, all the things that I know what those words meant, but I felt like being in the gray area of those words, or those meanings of those words, were okay. We have a law, we have laws, but I can be in the gray area of the law. I can almost stop at the stop sign and be okay. My life today is a little bit more black and white when it comes to the principles. The principles of AA and of sober living are black and white to me today.
Why is it important to put the welfare of others ahead of your own?
Well, I think in a worst case scenario, I'm on an airplane and it's going down, and the stewardess tells you before you even take off, if you run out of air, put the mask on yourself first before you put it on anybody else. Because you'll have air. To me, that concept, I'd like that concept, the way that concept is stated. But the question that you have is, how is it to put other people first? It depends on the situation. I'd rather have other people. I don't know. That's a tough one right there. I'd like to help other people, but when it comes to life and death, I'm more important than you. Sorry.
How do you determine or gauge the quality of your sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous?
Well, basically, I gauge my quality on how many active sponsees I have. And right now, I have 3 sponsees in county jail right now. One of them I haven't talked to since he went in. Another one is not doing well in the steps, and another one I'm just starting with. And the 2 sponsees I have actively going through the steps, one of them just went out and he hasn't called me in 5 days, and another one is a victim of life, and so I'm a little upset about it, and my peace of mind is a little bit skewed right now. What I need to do is go find another sponsee and start working with another sponsee instead of feeling angry that these guys aren't doing what they're supposed to do.
Are you willing and able to sponsor other members currently?
Absolutely. I used to have a limit that I would sponsor, a number of guys I would sponsor, and that was the limit I had was out at the recovery home that I went through. I've been going out there for about 10 years, and I'd put a limit at one man per at a time, one man at a time, and the reason being is if I had 2 men out there, one of them would usually get jealous or get angry because I was spending too much time with the other guy. And newcomers to get an attitude like that is not healthy. So I drew the line at one guy, not so much for my time and effort, but for the fact that the new guy, I didn't want to have them feel like I was leaving them out. And it's, I know it's not true, but they don't know. And I didn't want to put them in that position.
Presently, what is the most important activity in your recovery program?
Well, currently for me, the most important activity right now for me is going to meetings. And the reason I say that, like I just said, I've got 5 active sponsees. Let me rephrase that. I've got 5 sponsees that should be active, and basically none of them are. I've got a lot of guys that I talk to, sponsees that I talk to, that have many months and years of sobriety that are still doing a great program. But I need more than that. So my activities right now are basically going to more meetings.
Would you please generally describe the purpose of the 12 traditions of AA?
Well, to me, the traditions are for the group what the steps are to the individual. If I'm in a group and the group is not participating, or they're not going by their traditions, then there's something wrong with that group. And without going through the traditions one by one, there's certain parts of the traditions that must be met, in my opinion, for a group to be, I don't want to use the word valid, for it to be healthy for a newcomer.
What role models do you have in sobriety?
Well, I've got, I won't name names, but I've got some role models that I was always told to watch their feet. And I shouldn't say I never. And what that means is, not I never knew what it meant. Watching their feet means if I'm in a meeting and I hear someone sharing and they sound like they're just unbelievably in the program and doing what they're supposed to do, and then I go to McDonald's with them and they get a water cup and go get a soda, they're basically stealing a dollar drink. They're not working a good program. So the term watching their feet means don't listen to what they're saying. You need to watch what they're doing with their life. So I want to watch someone's actions, not what they're telling me they're doing.
What advice do you have for newcomers in AA?
Well, the broken record is get a sponsor, work the steps, go to meetings, which is basically what we need to do, what newcomers need to do. And someone, when I was new in the program, find a sponsor you like. Well, I picked my sponsor off of a phone list that my counselor gave me, called the guy out of the blue, never knew me before, and he and I are still together after 10 years. So for me, I'm not really looking for someone that has what I want. This is the advice I would give. Don't look for someone that has what you want. Look for someone that has the time and the effort to give to you to take you through the steps. If that doesn't work out, if there's some emotional or time frame or some sort of other problems with that person, find another sponsor. And if it doesn't work out with that sponsor and you tell him you're looking for another sponsor and he gets mad at you, you're making the right choice by getting another sponsor. So just a little tip there.
What advice do you have for old-timers in AA?
Well, that's my ego's going to jump right up here because I'll tell everybody what to do. I don't know, some of the experience I've had with old-timers, they get a bit of an attitude. And with 10 years of sobriety, some people consider me an old-timer, and I've had an attitude, which I don't deny. I need to stay with the program. I need to make sure I go to meetings regularly. I need to make sure that I can sponsor guys that ask me instead of just saying I will. And I need to make sure I put my program first. So old-timers, again, watch their feet. They say great stuff at meetings. If that's all you hear and see is great stuff at meetings and nothing else, then I would shy away from that old-timer other than being a friend.
Last question. Can you please describe what this experience was like?
Well, luckily I forgot I was supposed to do this tonight because I would have been thinking about it all week and getting very nervous. And so I remembered 30 minutes before I was supposed to be here. So it was a great experience for me because this is all coming off the top of my head, which is, for an egotistical alcoholic, probably a very, very good thing. And I appreciate you asking me to come up here and do this.
Thank you for your service, Tim. Tim, everyone.